Get out of our new home.
What? Why? What my husband Tyler was saying was completely the opposite from our previous discussions. As I stood there dumbfounded and asked, my husband shocked and hurt me even more with his words.
Why are you pretending not to understand? It's your fault, isn't it? I want to cherish my family. It's because you've been harassing my mother and sister that things turned out this way, isn't it?
I haven't done anything like that. I stared blankly at the face of my furious husband. My name is Hannah. I am currently 29 years old. I have a husband named Tyler, who is 6 years older than me. I have always been good at studying, and I approached both my university education and job hunting diligently, and I have worked hard with a plan. Thanks to this, I am currently working at a major pharmaceutical company. I met Tyler through an introduction by a friend's husband, Brian. Brian worked at the same place as Tyler, and I was introduced through Amy, a friend of mine. At that time, I was so focused on my job that romance was the last thing on my mind. I found work more enjoyable than studying and felt fulfilled by it. Amy was worried about me drifting away from marriage because I'm shy and quiet, in contrast to Tyler, who is outgoing and sociable. We thought we could complement each other well and decided to get married. When discussing marriage, Tyler and I, both earning above average, agreed to keep separate finances and only share the living expenses. The wedding and our married life began smoothly, but there was one problem: my relationship with my mother-in-law, Jane. Simply put, she disliked me. It's shameful for a woman to work so much. I can't believe a couple would keep separate finances. She constantly nagged about my job and our marital status. Complaints about our living arrangements and even the wedding details were frequent, like, isn't that too luxurious? And it was different in my time. I had to listen silently to such nitpicking despite being busy, which was exhausting. I discussed this with Tyler, but he would only say,
I think Mom is just lonely. You know, Dad isn't around anymore, and she's living alone. Please, just bear with it and keep her company.
Indeed, while she didn't summon me often or come to our house, she would complain every time we met, so I decided to continue enduring it. Despite these issues, our married life continued peacefully. At some point, we started planning to buy our own home. We had talked about buying a house before having children. Tyler once mentioned living with his mother, but then said,
I think Mom would hate living with us.
So we decided not to live with my difficult mother-in-law. However, I was concerned about my own parents. Tyler, if it's okay to live separately from your mother, can my parents live with us? My mom is not very strong and my dad is getting old. I'm worried about them. It would be great if we could live together. When I asked this, Tyler readily agreed.
I think that's a good idea. We were planning to buy a spacious house anyway. Call him over when the house is ready.
I was pleased with his approval, though I felt slightly uneasy at the time, but I didn't pursue it further. When I told my parents about living together, they were very happy. Just to be sure, my husband informed his mother that in our new home, it would be just us and my parents. Immediately after, she contacted me and complained. You're really selfish. How can you decide to live with your parents without consulting me? I'm sorry, we did consider living with you. That's fine. I refuse to live with a daughter-in-law like you. I was hurt by her words, but since I had no intention of living with her from the start, being refused was not an issue. We continued discussing with a real estate company while living in an apartment. One day, an unexpected person visited our apartment. It was Tyler's sister, Millie. She had moved out after getting married, but had returned to her parents' house after her husband cheated on her, which I had heard from Tyler. I quit my job at the same time I got divorced. I don't feel like working yet, but I need money to live. It seemed she had come to ask Tyler for money. When I went to call him, he came to the living room reluctantly.
I understand, but I don't have any cash on hand right now.
What? I exclaimed in surprise. It was unnatural for someone who earns more than average to have no cash on hand.
I try not to carry cash.
Tyler tried to evade the issue, but his sister in need was not ready to leave. Mom's savings are low and I can't pay this month's rent. Can you help? Tyler glanced at me. Feeling uncomfortable for a moment, I reluctantly gave her some money instead. After counting the bills, Millie simply said, "Thank you," and left immediately. Later, I tried to discuss her and Jane's living situations and when she would repay the money I had fronted. However, Tyler's response was irresponsibly casual.
Well, it's all pretty tough, isn't it? I'll return the money soon. We live together, so no need to rush.
Since then, as I continued to feel uneasy, Millie began to ask for money more frequently. Moreover, she started demanding money directly from me, not through Tyler. Giving her money the first time might have been a mistake. She might have gotten too comfortable. Since we also have a household budget, it's difficult to continue handing out money as requested. However, when we politely refused, Tyler's sister flew into a rage and started yelling. You two can't spare $1,000 even though you live together? I'm unemployed and barely scraping by. I'm a part of this family too, right? Can't you help me out a little? Still, I apologized, saying it was difficult, and managed to send her home for the time being. But then she immediately returned, this time bringing her mother with her. Aren't you being too selfish? Tyler's sister is your sister too. It's cruel to ignore family struggling with their lives. Exactly. Are you saying it's okay if we starve to death? I should never have allowed this marriage. They both assaulted me with insults and barged into the house. Then, as if they knew where to look, they rummaged through my drawers. You keep money here, right? Please wait, this is troubling. Ignoring my protests, they took the money I had stored in envelopes for living expenses. If such things continued, our lives would be ruined. Filled with fear, I stood dumbfounded as they left as if fleeing. At night, even when I shared my fears and anxieties with Tyler, he dismissed them, saying,
They are in trouble, so it can't be helped. Aren't you my wife? Like my mother says, we're family. You should manage things better. I'm tired and it's none of my concern.
He said that and went to sleep alone. Tyler works at an advertising agency, and indeed, he seemed busy with work at that time. He often worked overtime late into the night, and there were many weekends and business trips. Maybe he couldn't afford to care because of that. But it's tough when he won't even listen while I'm struggling with family issues. We had just built our dream home, but with family relations like this, can we really manage well in the future? I was already harboring serious doubts about our long marriage life ahead. And about Tyler, he started spending less time at home and our conversations decreased due to his busy work schedule. Suspicion definitely spread through my mind. I continued having sleepless nights, and to avoid being robbed again, I devised ways to not meet Tyler's sister and mother. On days they were likely to visit, I went out and I avoided phone and email conversations. Thanks to these efforts, I never gave them any money again. Although I received daily emails filled with sarcasm and insults, by intentionally leaving the house empty and avoiding direct meetings, I managed to keep from giving them any money. The home project progressed smoothly, and a few months later, the house was completed as planned. We had intentionally designed it as a duplex, with bathrooms and toilets on both the first and second floors. The kitchen was spacious and bright, easy to use. The layout was perfect for housework. We planned to call my parents over after we had moved in. Just as our living situation was settling and we were about to invite my parents, Tyler dropped a shocking statement.
About this house. I've decided to live here with my family, so please don't call your parents. And you should leave too.
What? Why? What my husband Tyler was saying was completely the opposite from our previous discussions. As I stood there dumbfounded and asked, my husband shocked and hurt me even more with his words.
What are you playing dumb for? It's your fault, isn't it?
I stared blankly at the face of my estranged husband. I don't understand what you're saying. Please explain properly.
I know that you've been harassing my mother and sister. Even when they come over, you send them away. You don't answer calls or emails.
Of course, I have no recollection of such harassment. It seems like Tyler is misunderstanding something. I'm sorry, but I can't keep giving money every time they ask for it.
Money, money. You're so stingy. It wouldn't help to hurt out a little.
They always ask for thousands of dollars. We have a mortgage to think about now. That won't work.
My family is your family too. Can't you think about helping them?
Why are you saying the same things as your mother and sister? I was overwhelmed with sadness and tears started to flow. Despite my state, Tyler just frowned and banged the table loudly.
You're pushing them too hard, and that's why my mother and sister are hurt. They've become mentally weak. I never thought you could be such a terrible person.
Wait, I wanted to protect our household finances. If I kept giving them thousands of dollars, it would affect our future. I'm sorry for your sister and mother, but I think it's their own issue. I can't keep meeting their unreasonable demands.
I will protect my mother and sister. I'm calling them here to live together. You've cornered my precious family and you don't understand my busy work life. I don't want to see your face anymore, so leave this place immediately.
With exaggerated anger, Tyler yelled at me. I was taken aback for a while.
You're supposed to be a wife in this house. Shouldn't you be more devoted to me, this house, and my family? You haven't quit your job and are working just as much as before. Do you want your earnings that badly? This marriage was meaningless.
Complaint after complaint was hurled at me, and just listening was exhausting. Indeed, the lack of conversation had already broken the relationship between Tyler and me. Additionally, I have continued to refuse the financial demands of his mother and sister. It was natural for the two of them, who resented me, to enlist him on their side. Moreover, they wanted to take over our newly built home for their own benefit. And Tyler, annoyed by his work and personal life, readily believed their claims and plotted to drive me out. It would be a lie to say I wasn't hurt. After all, he was the husband I had once loved. It's sad, painful, and very frustrating that our relationship has fallen apart like this. But on the other hand, I was also considering a separation from Tyler. Even when he occasionally returned home, he wouldn't listen or even look at me, which disgusted me. And there was another reason. As proof, I had secretly prepared a divorce paper. It's really sad that our house, which we built together, has come to this. But if you insist, then it can't be helped. For you and your family's sake, I'll give up the house. But in return, I have something to say. I don't want a separation where I just leave. So I want you to sign this divorce paper. When I placed the new divorce paper on the table, Tyler scoffed with a mixture of astonishment and derision.
You're well prepared. What do you mean?
I have also reached my limit with our life together. If you want to kick me out, it's the same. Let's talk about moving towards a divorce now. This situation was unexpected for me, so to ensure it doesn't happen again, I will record our conversation from here on. Tyler frowned unhappily, but reluctantly agreed. That night, I compiled the discussions related to the divorce. Since we kept separate finances as a couple, there was no division of assets. The house was originally purchased in Tyler's name, so he would continue to pay the mortgage. After all discussions were finalized, Tyler signed the divorce papers. I quickly packed my bags, took the divorce papers, and left the house. At the front door, I suddenly asked Tyler something that concerned me. Hey, about what we just decided, aren't you unemployed now? Are you really able to pay the mortgage? I expected him to get angry or make excuses, but Tyler avoided my gaze and gave a foolish response.
Huh? What are you talking about?
Disgusted by his attempt to feign ignorance, I was utterly dismayed. Yes, I knew it. I knew that Tyler was about to be fired from the advertising agency where he worked. Despite his circumstances, his feigned ignorance only fueled my disdain. I couldn't deal with him or his family anymore. But I was now a stranger to him, no longer involved. He could do as he pleased. Moreover, I had already investigated his actions. I had taken measures in advance. Then I returned to my parents' house with my belongings to start a new life. My parents were sorry to hear about my divorce, but when I expressed my desire to support them, they accepted it warmly. A peaceful daily routine began, commuting from the house where I lived with my parents to the company. It was just after that when it happened. One day after finishing work, I saw that Tyler had left numerous missed calls on my smartphone. Now an ex-husband, almost a stranger, what could he possibly want now? However, I had an inkling. I had no intention of calling back, but since he called again while I was at home, I reluctantly answered.
Hannah, don't ignore my calls.
I was at work. it can't be helped. So, what do you want?
I can't pay the house mortgage. If this continues, I'll be homeless.
So, what about it? I responded indifferently, but inwardly I thought, serves you right. That's why I had said it. How could he manage without a job?
The bank contacted me. My mother and sister are ignoring it. I was deceived by both of them.
His story was completely falling apart. I was already fed up and had no words to return. Tyler had been a manager at the advertising agency, and I knew there had been problems with his conduct. His inappropriate behavior towards a female employee had been an issue. He persistently asked about her private life and personal relationships, and took liberties with inappropriate physical contact when no one was watching. The woman, unable to endure it, consulted her superiors. The issue came to light quickly, and he had been warned several times. Even though we were divorced, it was truly embarrassing to hear such things as his ex-wife. The man who introduced Tyler, Brian, worked at the same company and obviously knew about this, and he seemed to have reprimanded Tyler. Wasn't he aware of the risk of me finding out? Despite all this, he apparently couldn't stop himself. Meanwhile, the company was advancing its efforts to create a better working environment for women, and Tyler's actions were severely scrutinized. He thought he was being discreet, but his efforts were sloppy. Eventually, after several meetings, it was decided that his behavior was too much, and he was to be dismissed. I heard about this through Amy via Brian. And the day after we separated, Tyler was officially notified of his dismissal. The day we decided on the divorce, he had responded foolishly when I mentioned his unemployment, unable to accept that he was about to lose his job and wanted to cover it up. I certainly won't sympathize, but honestly, I started to feel pity for him. I'm troubled to hear that, but we're divorced now. We're strangers, so you have to manage your mortgage on your own.
Even if we're divorced, you're still my ex-wife. What's with that attitude?
I don't want to hear that from someone who's been fired. Do you think I don't know?
You knew after all. I thought it was strange when you said that back then.
Yes, I heard it through Brian and Amy, so that's that. There's no point in continuing the conversation with Tyler. I wanted to hang up quickly, but from the other end of the phone, he kept trying to hold me back.
Wait, I want to cancel the divorce. Let's get married again.
No, why should I remarry you after you even took the house?
My mother and sister are just being selfish. I'll kick them out. And Hannah, you're misunderstanding something.
Misunderstanding? What exactly? You won't even listen or come near the house. I found out you were even having an affair. How can I remarry someone like that?
That can't be. It's a misunderstanding.
It's not a misunderstanding. Haven't you heard from the lawyer? I was the one who had sent the lawyer after Tyler. The investigation I had been conducting was about this. While I was struggling and hurt by Tyler's family matters, his overtime and business trips increased, and he stopped coming home. Feeling lonely because he wouldn't listen to family issues, I grew suspicious of his personal life and secretly hired a detective. The results were damning. He had been repeatedly going on late night dates and trips with another woman, not the one who had complained at the company. While I was hurting over issues with Tyler's family, he was happily spending time with a completely different woman. When I found out, I felt a mix of satisfaction that my suspicions were correct, along with anger and helplessness, and I cried all night. When I brought up divorce due to our house issues, I felt I couldn't deal with it anymore for these reasons too. Just before the divorce, I had some evidence and consulted a lawyer to demand compensation for his infidelity.
That's a setup, obviously. You just want the house back, right? What else are you unhappy about?
Which mouth of yours is saying that now? The evidence I left with a lawyer clearly shows your affair, doesn't it?
I'm telling you it's not.
Should I show more proof then? Besides what I left with a lawyer, there are other things that definitely confirm your affair.
Why won't you believe me?
Because it's the truth. I got fed up with my ex-husband pathetically pleading his innocence, and I couldn't help raising my voice.
Anyway, I'm really struggling to pay the mortgage, so I want us to remarry and for you to come back home.
Of course, I refuse.
Please, you're still working, right? I admit the misunderstanding. You weren't bullying my mother and sister.
What? Are you bringing that up now? He had misunderstood and harshly criticized me for continuing to work and supposedly attacking his mother and sister, and now he dares to say this.
Since we divorced, my unemployed sister has been begging for money at our house. When you refused, even my mother joined in, blaming her.
That's right, but it's too late to realize that now. Who was it that was playing around with his affair partner while I was suffering because of those people?
I'm sorry. I've admitted it, so let's leave it at that.
Unfortunately, I can no longer trust you. Feeling disgust for my ex-husband, who was now trying to cozy up to me, I desperately wanted to end the phone call.
I'm begging you. I can't pay the mortgage without you, Hannah.
So you want to get back with me just for the money? Unbelievable. You know, it's not just the affair, but I also know why you were fired. You kept bothering a girl at work, and even though your boss warned you, you didn't stop. I'm really ashamed.
It's a misunderstanding. I would never do such a thing.
So even if you didn't bring up the house issue, with all that's happened, I would still have proposed divorce. As I said this, Tyler finally fell silent. He must be feeling bitter, unable to find any words to argue back. I ended the hopeless call with my ex-husband right then and blocked his number. After that, I've been working diligently while living with my beloved parents. There were days when Tyler's affair and the issues with his mother and sister made it hard to focus on work, but I loved my job and continued to excel and achieve results. I've been recognized by my superiors for my hard work, and I've received raises and promotions. I still hear about Tyler through Amy. Apparently unable to stay unemployed, he tried to find a new job, but the reason for his dismissal from his previous job hindered him, and he was not hired anywhere. Now he's scraping by with a low-paying part-time job. With such a situation, it seemed impossible for him to pay the mortgage on the house, and eventually his mother and sister had to start working part-time too. Their plan to take over a house for free completely fell apart, and they must be bitter now. Also, Tyler's savings has significantly decreased. It appears he had been lavishly supporting the woman he had an affair with. On top of the house mortgage, he now has to pay compensation to me. Furthermore, he's being sued by the female employee he harassed at work. I heard his savings were quickly depleted due to the additional compensation he has to pay her. Now struggling to make ends meet, but not wanting to lose the house, the family of three is toiling away, earning minimum wage and utterly exhausted. Especially my sister-in-law, who was desperate to borrow money from me, had told me she was divorced because her husband cheated. But I later found out she was the one who had an affair. Her husband grew tired of her and divorced her. She had to pay compensation to her husband and ended up in debt. She probably intended to use the money she took from me to pay off her debts. Really, what are these siblings up to? Regretting having been involved with such a foolish family, I'm glad I divorced quickly and cut ties. A few years later,
Then this will be the contract.
I thanked the real estate agent along with my parents. I am now planning my second dream home, a more comfortable and ideal house to live in with my parents, with the one I built before.
Thank you so much. This house is much nicer than the previous one.
Thank you. I'm happy that we could talk this through together.
It's a shame about your marriage.
It's okay. I've forgotten about that stupid man. The most important people to me are the parents who raised me. As I said this, my parents smiled happily. From now on, I'll start a peaceful and happy life with the parents who have always supported me. I'm really looking forward to the new house being built.